Move on to Dr. Neil Pickering. He's a global strategic sales lead at Global Services Marine and Offshore of Bureau Veritas in the United Kingdom. He's gonna talk about successful experiences in the world. I'd like to, on behalf of Sobena, thank you for your participation, and hope we're looking forward to hearing your experiences on the subject. So the mic is yours. Feel free to start your presentation. And again, for the audience, if you like to write your questions in English in the chat or in Portuguese, I can try to translate the questions to Dr. Neil for the last part of this panel. Thank you, Dr. Neil, and we're now.
Okay, hello, everybody.
Yes.
Thanks. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Theodoro. Okay, I'm just going to try and work the technology out and try and share my screen with the presentation, and then we shall begin. Okay. Let's bring that one. So, yeah, that's the right. Okay, is everybody seeing the screen on presentation mode? Yes? Hello?
Not really.
Yep, can you see the screen? Yeah, okay, good. Okay, so good morning, afternoon or evening, everybody.
Sorry, Neil, sorry, we cannot see your presentation yet. It's all
right,
black.
Okay. Right, okay, I shall try again.
I can only see your name.
All right, okay. Share screen. Let's try this one again. How's that? Is that any better?
It's starting. Yeah, there we go. Yes.
And
you can see it now.
And just a minute, try and get on presentation. Right, can you see on presentation mode? Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay, just hold on a second. Let's try and move this out. Right, okay. So firstly, I'd just like to thank everybody for giving Bureau Veritas the opportunity to present to you on the subject of successful decommissioning. So before I go into the detail of my presentation, I'm going to try and do a little bit of scene setting of my understanding of the Brazilian, what's present in Brazilian waters. So I believe there are 133 platforms along the coastal region, 77 of which are fixed, 37 are FPSOs, 14 are semi-submersibles, 3 are FSOs, 1 tension leg wet platform, and a floating production unit, FPU. Excuse me, all of which are at various stages of life, but a fair proportion of them are aging and moving into late life. So all of these bring with them their own unique challenges when approaching decommissioning. So the question is always going to be, how can this be done safely, efficiently, without environmental impact, and whilst being compliant with the required regulation and legislation? So then you add to this now the ever-increasing movement on climate change and impact the oil and gas industry has upon climate change, and the challenge of green decommissioning grows in unison. So what does successful decommissioning look like? So first of all, hello, my name is Neil Pickering, and I've been in the oil and gas industry for over 35 years, predominantly operations and maintenance, working in both operator and contractor organizations in the UK, but also in the Middle East, Asia, and the USA. So I'm also very conscious that I only have 20 minutes to present, and so I'm going to keep this relatively high level. But of course, at the end, I'm only too happy to have any follow-on discussions where more detail can be included. So I've got 3 simple objectives today to try and summarize what are perceived as the critical success factors of decommissioning projects, the vast majority of which are from experience in the UKCS, in part to you where BV have already contributed to decommissioning projects around the world, and at the end of it show you where BV can offer its support through its service lines. And then of course, followed by any questions you may have or wish to ask. So the process of decommissioning an offshore installation. to be honest, is not rocket science. It's a relatively simple process, but it does have some fairly complex aspects to it and critical activities to consider. So the process starts with a decision point, and that decision point should occur as a minimum at around about 5 years before end of field or economic life, referred to as late life stage of the asset, as we all know. So it's at this point where management needs to consider the options and enter into what is referred to as the optioneering stage, whereby a variety of technical experts will be required. So there are 4 primary options to be considered. First one being life extension, should the economics of the remaining reserve or near field potential suggest that's the case. Sale of the asset, should the economics of the asset no longer fit with the current owner's portfolio. Or repurpose. Now, repurposing of offshore installations is nothing new. It's been looked at for many years. However, with the onset of the energy transition, the menu of options for repurposing has increased, such as hydrogen plants and transportation to shore through existing pipeline infrastructures. CCUS, so the processing of imported captured carbon and permanent storage into existing well structure, should the geology allow. Or a possible combination of the two to create blue hydrogen hubs, or jacket reuse for offshore wind turbines, or of course decommissioning and removal, which is the option we're here to discuss today. So before I run through the next section, I must again stress that this is a relatively simple process and one that I'm sure you're all very familiar with. However, I feel it necessary to articulate the process and focus on some of the critical aspects that, if not afforded the appropriate investment in time and effort, could prove detrimental to the project, resulting in time and budget overrun. And it's proffered on the basis of, as I mentioned later on, a critical mass of experience that has been gained in the UKCS. So in addition to all of that, we're all acutely aware that the world has changed dramatically in the last 18 months, and indeed it continues to do so. And as such, green decommissioning is now racing up the agenda of many governments, regulators and owners, asset owners and supply chain. So the 3 stages to the process. So the planning and preparation, detailed planning and preparation, and then the execution and closeout. So approvals must be sought at the first 2 stages of the process through internal, well, not either, but through internal governance and external regulations. So usually a gated process of approval. The critical success factors are in the iterations of the approval, where any observations, non-compliances or anomalies must be meticulously scrutinised, risk assessed and satisfactorily concluded before moving on. So I also add to this the critical success factors of timing, scope and execution. So these should be the 3 primary objectives to be successful. Rigorous and effective assurance of this part of the process is essential, so failure to do so will create the first flaw in the process that will inevitably propagate and serve to weaken the project. So only last week I attended the DECOM North Sea Conference, which is an annual event and one that Bureau Veritas was very proud to be gold sponsors of, where over 160 presentations were given over the course of the week. So indeed, I myself presented on green decommissioning, raising the question of, is the supply chain race ready for decommissioning in a net zero basin? Presentations were from a, a combination of government, operators and supply chain. Operator presentations could not emphasize enough the need for detailed planning and preparation. And I say again, this is based on experience. These guys have been through some pain, been through some failures, they've been through some successes. And the need for detailed planning and preparation during late life and the lead up to COP. It's during this late life period, or ultra late life as some refer to it, that a significant amount of benefit can be gained by undertaking appropriate levels of preparation work, whilst the asset is still generating some level of income. So we'll now explore some of the considerations of the planning and preparation. So safety, first and foremost, of course. Safety must be a primary consideration of any project, whether it's decommissioning or not. So during decommissioning, activity levels will increase. So this will materialize in the form of POB and marine and air traffic that will require increased scrutiny and detailed logistics. So for instance, safety systems on the asset post-COP must be maintained, as normal operational power generation will be disrupted. So how to generate power to maintain safety systems, for instance, on an asset that is actually COP. So some early decommissioning projects in the UKCS, this was overlooked and resulted in a significant amount of modifications and upgrades to enable increased amounts of diesel to be stored on the asset to maintain power generation, which has obviously resulted in budget and emissions increase. So a clear indication of a lack of detailed planning and preparation. Environment, now front and center of an increasing number of agendas, so net zero, as we all are coming to know it. Decommissioning is an energy intensive exercise, and the use of vessels and rigs contribute to the project's overall carbon footprint. So improvements in the efficiency of scope can reduce the amount of time a vessel or rig spends on site and help lower the total emissions of a project, whereas improvements in the overall energy efficiency of these vessels can reduce the emissions on a vessel by vessel basis. So scrutiny of the supply chain from an emissions perspective is an essential or an increasing essential facet of the process. So also the consideration of material disposal, reuse or recycling, and campaigns. The clustering of assets that are to be decommissioned and campaign planning the use of vessels and resources is now a preferred direction of travel for future decommissioning projects in the UKCS. And it also promotes a significant increase in collaboration between asset owners and operators. The economics, clearly a major consideration for an asset once it's post-COP because it's generating no income. Therefore, optimizing efficiency through best-in-class planning and preparation will serve to ensure that the money that is spent is both essential and optimal. So again, consideration of campaigns of near-field assets could serve to reduce overall cost and emissions of the project, and I'm going to some of that later on. Process management, as I said earlier, the actual process of decommissioning is a relatively simple one if afforded the commensurate amount of time and effort to ensure its success. It is at this point a holistic overview of the project must be taken. So this must include event sequencing, vessel chartering, supplier selection, and again I go into that in a bit more detail later, technical capability, capacity and availability, and permit requirements, to name a few. So establishing a definitive COP and removal target date will and has proved to assist in focusing project objectives and targets. So a word of warning, do not drift into COP. A definitive date for COP is a huge help. But on a technical perspective, the technical requirements of a decommissioning project are pretty broad. Availability of internal and external requirements must be a consideration. Early formation, and this is a big lesson learned that came out last week in the decommissioning conference, early formation of a core project team with a decommissioning mindset. And you might ask yourself, what is a decommissioning mindset? Decommissioning historically has been looked at as the end of life project. Whereas the magnitude of decommissioning globally now, young people coming into the industry could actually have a career in decommissioning. So a decommissioning mindset is about treating it as the same way as a greenfield project, and the project milestones have to be hit, and the efficiency gains need to be driven into the project. So a core project team and with a decommissioning mindset that will stay with the project through to completion. And this includes the inclusion of specialists, consultants, and independent bodies, because the familiarization with the project from cradle to grave and the early engagement with supply chain will fine-tune project team antenna, facilitating early warning signal detection and weak signals of risk and problem solving. From a regulatory perspective, clear and concise understanding of the regulatory requirements in the region is essential, obviously. Clear and transparent communications with the regulator as early as possible will lay the foundations for a productive project relationship. And even the inclusion, perhaps, of a regulator representative into the project team ensures regular communications and increases the potential for regulator guidance and intervention where required. Societal, okay. Societal consideration. So this has increased in focus, and it's fair to say that the eyes of the world are upon us. Society interest in decommissioning activity is very high and continues to gain momentum, with the world's organisations of influence shining an increasingly bright spotlight on what and how the industry tackles decommissioning. So in summary to this section, the above is not an exhaustive list. However, it is proffered on the basis of a critical mass of experience gained in the UKCS, and as such, critical considerations are considered hotspots in the preparation and planning of a decommissioning project. So moving on to detailed planning and preparation. Safety, societal and environmental remain now as a constant throughout any decommissioning project, and quite rightly so, and should be the subject of constant monitoring and scrutiny throughout the project. So at this point, consideration should be given to assessing, monitoring and reporting the project's overall emissions data, establishing its carbon footprint and publishing targets. This should also include the supply chain. So at the same time, detailed consideration of the reuse, recycling and repurposing of equipment such as pipes, valves, pumps, turbines, etc. So it's an opportunity to set the foundation for a green decommissioning backdrop on the project. So until now, or until very recent times, in established decommissioning basins, such considerations and actions have been minimal. So it has been undertaken as a tick box exercise, whereas the focus that is on this now is increasing by the day. And in the current and ever-changing climate change environment, now is the time to elevate such considerations and take positive actions. Now, perhaps Petrobras, AMP, Brazil have the opportunity to set a new benchmark in this arena. Budget and regulatory liaison, well, it doesn't require much explanation. Budgets will be refined, and regulator liaison will continue throughout the permit process and the project. But it is worth noting that regulators across the globe are focusing heavily on decommissioning projects' green credentials, and I'm sure Brazil is no exception to that. Supplier selection and contract. So to date, again, another learning. To date, these two aspects have been dealt with in a traditional manner, focusing on safety and cost performance indicators, which form then the fundamentals of any contract. There's a strong indication that in the UKCS, for example, that future contracts will be won based on sustainability performance, and this will be a major factor in any contract awards. So as the energy transition and the commitments to net zero progress at pace, and as such, operators, asset owners, Scope 3 emissions are now in focus. So now is the time to coach and mentor suppliers to get their emissions data onto their radars by making emissions data reporting and verification a supplier qualification. So incentivizing suppliers to get their Scope 1 and 2 houses in order. The earlier this is declared to the supply chain, the sooner they will address it. And if verified, this will then form elements of Petrobras' Scope 3 emissions, for instance. So traditionally, the scope, the Greenhouse Gas Protocol scope tends to be thought of as a top-down process, which makes Scope 3 emissions a mammoth task, particularly if the size of something like Petrobras that probably has 1,000 suppliers. If it's a bottom-up approach, it makes it less onerous for the operator, and if the verification process happens from a bottom-up approach, then as each supplier is verified up the chain, then the verification details can be passed up the chain away, and the total emissions value can be accounted for at that level. Marine services. This is a vital aspect of any decommissioning project, as we all know, covering rigs from P&A activity to heavy lift vessels for large-scale removal. So early identification of vessel types, technical specification requirements, charter lead times, must all be meticulously reviewed. So then marine warranty and assurance services can then be contracted and efficiencies built into the scope of supply, which again offers a potential to lower both cost and carbon footprint. Circular economy. So the options to ship and remove assets and equipment overseas for disposal is increasingly being scrutinised from a sustainability perspective. So more and more regions around the world are now insisting that options for disposal, recycle and reuse within the region be fully exhausted before any consideration be given to going outside of the region. The reuse and repurposing of existing assets and infrastructure is also increasingly hot topic, as I mentioned earlier, going back to the optioneering stage where of the process where the opportunities to consider repurposing of assets and infrastructure for CCUS, hydrogen and offshore wind should be fully explored. So the sequence of events and identification of major milestones is a major requirement. So again, campaigns and clustering of assets, as I mentioned earlier, is where significant benefits can and have been realised from a cost and a carbon footprint perspective. Compliance at a local level, that its suppliers and resources from within the region should not present many issues and can be assured as an integral part of the supply selection process. Any decommissioning project will require permits and environmental impact assessments in accordance with the regional legislation. These can be very labour intensive and will require authority approval. So the sooner this process begins, the greater the chance of a smooth, seamless approval route. However, most, if not all, decommissioning projects take on an international aspect as vessels and resources are brought into play from foreign origins.
Okay. Dr. New, we lost you for a minute. I don't know if it was just myself or...
Okay. Where did I get to?
Okay, you're back now. That's
yeah,
good.
okay. So, okay, I'll continue on. So, I'll start again at compliance. So compliance from a local level, that is supplies and resources from within the region, should not present many issues and can be assured as an integral part of the supply selection process. Any decommissioning project will require permits and environmental impact assessments, obviously, in accordance with regional legislation. So these can be very labour intensive and will require authority approvals. The sooner this process begins, the greater the chance of a smooth and seamless approval route. However, most, if not all, decommissioning projects take on an international optic aspect, as vessels and resources are brought into play from foreign origins. This gives rise to import and export regulations, vessels entering foreign waters, specialist resources drafted in, and materials and equipment imported, all of which require detailed review for compliance requirements that differ from the countries of origin. The earlier this is factored into contracted terms and conditions, the greater the chance of success. Failure to do so could add considerable delay and cost to the project. The last but by no means least, I add innovation and technology. So innovations can be in many forms. So building a diverse, dedicated project team who are actively encouraged to constantly challenge the norm in both scope and execution will bear dividends. Seeking out new technologies and ways of working that suit the project objectives of safety, lowest possible cost, and lowest impact to the environment, conjoined with a decommissioning mindset, will form the foundations of success. Okay, so moving on to execution and closeout activities now. So at this stage, all of the planning and preparation is assumed to have been completed to the satisfaction of the client and their project team and the regulators, that it has passed through all required review and approval routes. This is when the rubber hits the road. So discipline, rigor, leadership and management are paramount and will be the difference between success and failure. So I've presented this slide in its complete form. Needless to say that successful execution will depend on the following. So empowering the project team to innovate and explore technology options. Challenge scope execution methodologies in pursuit of the lowest possible cost, lowest possible impact on environment and a safe project. Strong leadership and management in the areas shown on the slide, ensuring optimal delivery and an enthusiasm to drive the project as planned. So do what you said you would do. UKCS experience demonstrates that all of the above and previous slides emphasizes the value of meticulous planning and logistics. Open and honest and early engagement with the supply chain has and can deliver cost reductions in the region of 35% on original estimates. So this is bringing into play technology, innovation, really collaborating with the supply chain and really getting the best. It's not about squeezing the supply chain, it's about working with the supply chain. Early exploration and utilization of latest technologies, both topsides and subsea, to support and aid the destruct and removal of assets will bring benefit. P&A constitutes about 49% of the total decommissioning costs of decommissioning projects. So one project in the UKCS has quoted a 30% saving on the P&A programme as a direct result of scope and execution challenge from a dedicated project team working across a portfolio of assets, maximising the utilisation of P&A rigs. The utilisation of neighbouring assets to house the workforce not only reduced overall project costs, but also enabled target COP to be achieved, and a significant reduction in CO2 emissions. So to the tune of about 50 to 65 tonnes per day on the asset. So this, of course, then needs to be offset against increased flying hours backwards and forwards to neighbouring assets. Nonetheless, it resulted in a net reduction in CO2. So, and then maximising preliminary engineering and removal studies pre-COP is proven to be beneficial, during which opportunities arise to challenge scope and execution again. So again, I go back to, and this again, it was a point that was laboured many times last week in the decommissioning conference, establishing a definitive COP date has proven to focus project teams' efforts on achieving that and consequential project milestone dates, which resulted in a very well prepared programme of work. Again, the use of digital twin technology has been validated as offering up to a 35% reduction in decommissioning costs for assets in excess of 10,000 tonne topsides. Greater benefit may even be realised if utilised in early late life. And the clustering of assets has proven beneficial when campaign approaches used for subsea infrastructure removal, seabed cleanup and jacket removal as examples. So if you have a portfolio or clustering of assets into a portfolio and you attack it as a larger project as opposed to individual projects, the optimization across once COP disconnection has been achieved and the top sides have been removed, a campaign could be launched to around subsea infrastructure removal, jacket removal, and then consequential seabed cleanup at the end of it. And again, this is a direction of travel that is happening in the North Sea, in the UKCS. Okay, so PV references. Where have Bureau Veritas provided decommissioning related services? So as you can see from the slide we've participated from the USA right the way across to Australia. Then moving on to a bit more detail in terms of reference projects, you see BV has provided services to a number of projects in a consultancy, assurance and a site services capacity. And supporting decommissioning projects in the USA, the North Sea, UK and the North Sea, Norway, Malaysia and Australia. So I won't labour on the references too much, but needless to say that, you know, our experience and knowledge within the decommissioning arena is constantly building. Okay, so finally, Bureau Veritas can provide support and technical capability at any juncture of the process depicted on the screen, whether that be at the decision-making stage, moving into optioneering. BV can support clients in these areas, providing technical expertise from its global network and through its technical centres, whether it be life extension. So we've got a track record of providing independent assessment of asset suitability for extension, highlighting where equipment or structures require modifications, upgrade or replacement, providing a technical baseline for investment decisions. Repurposing of assets, again, Bureau Veritas track record in hydrogen, carbon capture, and offshore renewables, including technical risk, type approvals, technology qualification and verification, and certification services. In the sale and purchase of assets, again, we have a track record in supporting clients in the process, providing technical expertise to support both the sale and or the purchase aspects of the process. And then, of course, decommissioning, which I've already showed you. So in addition, we've worked with a significant number of companies supporting sustainability, including the circular economy, greenhouse gas emissions accounting, reporting and verification across all scopes. And the Bureau Veritas Smart Asset Service can support clients as an integrator or a provider. So if a digital twinning route or a digitalization route is chosen, you know, we are just as experienced in acting as a broker in terms of integrator and integrator of such digital solutions, or we have a provision that we can roll along as well. And then finally, Bureau Veritas would be delighted and honoured to be a trusted partner of choice as you continue on your decommissioning journey, should you wish to do so. So that's me. I try to keep within me 20 minutes. Thank you for listening to me. I do hope you found it informative. I know it was relatively high level, but I was conscious of the time constraints. And as I stated on the onset, please feel free to ask any questions or contact me directly, and my email is on the screen there. So thank you very much, and I'll leave it at that.